tolerance is the last virtue of a depraved society.
D. James Kennedy Ministries presents Truths That Transform.
This week on Truths That Transform, we look at the cultural Marxists who are trying to remake America in their own image.
It is the very people that the left here in the United States talk about uplifting and helping are the ones that suffer the most under socialism.
The institutions of our nation are being moved ever leftward.
Right now, 75% of students in college support socialism, think it's the best form of government.
What's happening in America, and how can we recover? Find out on today's Truths That Transform. Welcome to Truths That Transform, a production of D. James Kennedy Ministries, where we are standing for truth and defending your freedom. Thanksgiving is just days away, but to hear modern leftists tell the story, you would think there's nothing to give thanks for and nobody to thank. Instead, they view the whole thing as a legacy of oppression by the likes of the Christian Pilgrims who sailed to America in 1620. This false narrative is part of a legacy of cultural Marxism, which has gained ascendancy in the West in recent decades. On today's program, we'll uncover their agenda to remake America in their own image. And we will share a resource that will encourage you in these perilous times. As we begin, William J. Murray was raised in the household of America's most famous atheist, Madalyn Murray O'Hair. He grew up with Marxist ideology preached daily in his home, but he came to see the grievous and deadly errors of communism. I recently had a chance to sit down and talk with him in Washington. We used to be concerned about liberals. I'm not so concerned about liberals. It's the hard left that seems to raise the greatest concern. And they always seem to be looking to squelch religious freedom. Why is that?
Well, religious freedom, number one, is the first freedom. Without religious freedom, you cannot have freedom of speech, you cannot have freedom of assembly, you can't have freedom of the press. So if you can restrict religious freedom, you can restrict all other freedoms.
The left today seems to be looking to deconstruct the most basic institutions of our culture, family and church, and many of the institutions of intermediation who provide support and help and do many good things. All of those things are being deconstructed by the left. Why?
This is a very good question, because I would like all the millennials who have 95% of their friends or 99% of their friends on Facebook, the next time they have a flat tire, to ask one of those friends on Facebook to come and give them a hand. They are looking to the state, they are looking to anything except the traditional means of social interaction. And that social interaction is probably the greatest and most important part of humanity. Without the kind of social interaction that you have in churches, when you just depend on some mysterious outside institution, that is what breeds violence. You take a look at the comments that go on the internet, the way people speak, the way people treat each other. You lose the aspects of society when you're not dealing directly with other human beings. And this tendency that in the left is to move away from that interaction and have some giant outside institution take care of all your needs.
The law of God was given so that we might understand the character of God better. A God who says, "Thou shalt not kill," values human life, and we should too. But the law of God is also to constrain us, which all the societal institutions you've been talking about do as well. So the removal of those institutions is also the removal of constraints, right? Or is it a different constraint?
The question is, do people have personal restraints through belief, or do they have external controls? What the left does not understand is when you remove all of those personal restraints that come with a belief in biblical principles and biblical law, when you remove those personal restraints and rely on the state to enforce it with the brutal hand, the iron fist of the state, well, then you wind up in the situation of everybody trying to find ways around the iron fist of the state. Some way to steal, some way to cheat, because that is in the inherent tendency of mankind. I was in Cuba about 18 months ago, and I could go into the details of the socialist imposed poverty on the nation, and the traditions that have been destroyed, including the fact that they don't even put pepper on the table down there because they can't afford it. There's no spice in any of the food at all. As incredible as that might sound, and because it's 3 generations of socialism, the current generation believes that Cubans never had spicy food. But seeing the kind of imposed poverty, and it is the very people that the left here in the United States talk about uplifting and helping, are the ones that suffer the most under socialism.
As Bill Murray just noted, religious freedom is really the first freedom, and yet it's being lost today as Christians are being harassed and punished for taking biblical stands on things like same-sex marriage. In an era of so-called tolerance, the one thing that cannot be tolerated is truth. I'm joined now by my very good friend Jennifer Kennedy Cassidy, daughter of Dr. D. James Kennedy. Jennifer, your dad saw this whole modern notion of tolerance as nothing more than a wolf in sheep's clothing, didn't he?
Yes, you're right, Frank. And he knew that that concept of tolerance was being formed into a totalitarian hammer. For generations, we've been taught that tolerance is a virtue. And there is a sense in which that's very true. We should be kind and loving to people we disagree with, and we should attempt to peacefully persuade them of our position. But in recent decades, the definition of tolerance has changed, and with the new definition has come all manner of heavy-handed coercion in service of a far-left ideology. My father, Dr. D. James Kennedy, was an astute observer of cultural trends, which he saw through a biblical lens. He knew that there was something deeply troubling about the redefinition of tolerance, and saw how it would be used to silence all dissent, particularly those who believe the Bible. He explains more in this portion of his vital message, The New Tolerance.
We are now in the post-modern age. It's a new age, folks. Altogether different. If you think things are the same as they were, have you got a surprise coming. Someone said that there's one thing that's being taught to our children today. From kindergarten through graduate school, there's one lesson that they're learning. It is the dominant theme of the postmodern curriculum. You know what it is? Tolerance. Tolerance is being willing to put up with, endure, bear with those whose views or lifestyles are different from yours without agreeing with them. And every Christian should be tolerant in the correct and historical meaning of that word. It's what the Bible means in the love chapter of 1 Corinthians 13, which says, "Love endureth all things." But if you think that's what is being taught in the curricula of this country, you are very wrong. The new tolerance means this: not only do you put up with and endure and bear with those who have different views, habits, and or lifestyle than your own, but you agree with their views as well. Furthermore, you hold that their views are equally as valid and as true as your views. And furthermore, that their lifestyle is equally true and equally valid with your own, and therefore there's no possible way that you could be intolerant, because there's nothing to be intolerant of. And furthermore, you must even be willing to promote and endorse that other lifestyle, since it is every bit as good as yours. Furthermore, there is a total concept of feeling that's involved in postmodernism, and we have even invented a new civil right, and that is the civil right for my feelings not to be hurt. Tolerance is the last virtue of a depraved society. When you have an immoral society who has blatantly, proudly violated all of the commandments of God, there's one last virtue they insist upon: tolerance for their immorality. And they will not have you condemning what they have done as being wrong. And they've created a whole world construct in which it's not, and in which they are no longer the criminal or the villain or the evil person, but you are. And so they call evil good and good evil. And believe me, that's just the beginning. Christ says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. That statement alone could one day in America could have landed him in jail, because it is absolutist. Only Christ died for the sins of the world. Only Christ rose again from the dead. Only Christ offers eternal life freely to those that will trust in him. Christianity is diametrically opposite from all of the other world's religions in those things that really matter. But because it is absolute and not relative, it is Christianity against which all of this that I have mentioned is aimed. Dear friends, it's time that we stood up for Jesus Christ and showed some backbone while we still have a place to stand.
The new tolerance is anything but. It certainly does not extend to Christians and conservatives. Earlier this fall, a shameful character assassination was carried out against Justice Brett Kavanaugh during his confirmation process for the Supreme Court. The political left, which has relied on the High Court to implement its agenda, has never been able to pass these things legislatively, and they fought Kavanaugh's confirmation with every smear they could fabricate. We told you back in August that the left would wage a no-holds-barred campaign against Justice Kavanaugh, and we were sadly proven right, even beyond what we could have imagined. Once again, to those who wish to fundamentally transform America, they have taken a page out of the Saul Alinsky playbook. Our own Dr. Jerry Newcomb has more.
About a year before what happened to Kavanaugh and the serious accusations of attempted rape leveled against him, Nancy Pelosi explained the tactics of a smear campaign to some reporters.
You smear somebody, with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and they'll say, see, it's reported in the press that this, and this. So they have that validation that the press reported the smear, and then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made. And it's a tactic.
Where do such tactics come from? Many would point to Saul Alinsky, the Marxist community organizer from Chicago, who heavily influenced Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. Alinsky taught that the ends justify the means, and that constant conflict is good to wear down the opposition.
First rule of change is controversy. You can't get away from it for the simple reason all issues are controversial. Change means movement, and movement means friction, and friction means heat, and heat means controversy.
We should recognize who he is now because his playbook is being followed by people who oppose a biblical worldview. It's important to remember, and you know this, who Alinsky dedicated that book to. Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky is dedicated to Lucifer, the stereotype, the model of a radical, of the rebel.
And this comes from Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. It's the dehumanizing of your opponents so that it's what the Nazis did to the Jews, dehumanize them so that once they move to the next phase of literally exterminating them, you could somehow rationalize and justify. And that's what the left, not all on the left, look, I'm fine with those who have ideological differences, but there is an element among them that has this fascist, this tyrannical view that they must silence and eliminate their opponents.
Is this Alinsky-inspired violence in the streets becoming the new normal in America? Disagreement in politics has always been around, but today it seems political disagreements have become toxic.
You get out and you create a crowd and you push back on them.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country.
Even some on the left recognize the problem with all of this.
We seem to be living in a time of utter tribalism.
Many of the attacks on the street became more intense beginning in January 2017, when President Trump was inaugurated.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
How did we go from George Washington and the cherry tree, and I never shall tell a lie, to Antifa, who is kids born and raised in the United States, went to public schools, taught in our public schools, paid for by our tax dollars, who feel they can lie, they can cheat, they can kill, they can destroy property, they can show up to rallies to silence your freedom of speech and my freedom of speech with brass knuckles, with knives and machete to stab people. They can block highway. How did we get there? This is why Christians need to rise. This is why people who love God, who love our country need to rise.
The level of violence has gotten to the point where a left-wing activist tried to kill Congressman Steve Scalise last year at a baseball practice. Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, once said, "History is made in the streets." In other words, get enough brown shirts to beat up and silence the opposition and you seize power. Might makes right. What an unchristian thought.
I think the left has done a very good job of creating a group of supporters that are very active. They can often be called social justice warriors, but let me give you an example. There is no, in 5,500 years of recorded history, you cannot point to any socialistic nation that has increased freedom and increased prosperity for the people. And yet right now, 75% of students in college support socialism, think it's the best form of government. Now, there's nothing historically you can point to, there's nothing statistically you can point to, but that's what they've been taught. And they've also been taught that if people disagree with what we're telling you, you need to not tolerate that. You need to stand up, you go after them, you call them bigots. So we know that with college students right now and graduates, 53% do not support free speech, And 19% of college students right now think that violence is an acceptable response to speech they disagree with. Anything that contradicts what they think is right, and they've been told that you should reject all speech that contradicts what we have told you. And so we are at a precipitous time in America.
Mitch McConnell is now the latest politician to be heckled while at a restaurant.
It's very disconcerting if you believe in freedom of speech, if you believe in dialogue and free flow of ideas. And what you've seen is almost a complete takeover of the secular university by the progressive left. And so they don't want free speech. They don't believe in free speech. They believe in free speech for themselves, and they do not want to engage in dialogue. They want to shut you down if you disagree with them.
In such divided and contentious times, it can be easy to become weary of the battle. We all need the refreshment and hope that God alone provides, even as we do the work He has given us to do in this world. Christ transforms people, and He transforms nations through those same people. He truly is the answer to our problems. And we have an outstanding resource to share with you to give you much needed encouragement in these tumultuous times. Dr. Jerry Newcomb is back with us to tell us more. Jerry, you and Dr. Kennedy worked together in developing this tremendous resource. Tell us a little bit about Strength for Today.
Frank, this is a day-by-day devotional where you can feed on the Word of God as Dr. Kennedy, frankly, culls through the Bible and gives us all kinds of great lessons for each particular day. And he shows us how, as you like to say, the mind of Christ applies to all the great issues of life. So Dr. Kennedy not only deals with spiritual truths, but also with issues that are related to our culture and how we live. And I think it's a great book in the sense that it's very positive compared to all the negative messages we're constantly bombarded with.
Excellent, excellent. Well, with year end a little more than a month away, you will want to get a copy of Strength for Today to usher in 2019. It also would make an outstanding Christmas gift. Simply write to us at D. James Kennedy Ministries, Box 11154, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33339, or call toll-free 877-962-7677, or you can go online to djkm.org. Now, Jerry, what sets this kind of a devotional apart from other books, Christian books that you might read?
The cultural mandate. I think the fact that Dr. Kennedy would not only show the light of the gospel and evangelism and have apologetics in there, in other words, the defense of our faith, that kind of thing, but also he is showing that the Bible has something to say about the economy. The Bible has something to say about government. The Bible has something to say about how we should live our lives. And so I think Dr. Kennedy's teaching about these great issues of the day is what sets this apart.
Very good. Daily time in God's Word is essential. It's the fuel that we need to live our lives for His glory in times like these. Dr. Kennedy said, we were created by God to do great things, to soar high, and to make an impact upon our world for Him. Strength for Today is a collection of biblical truths that will help you live that out, taking you through the year in victory and with purpose. Contact us right away with a generous donation, and we will send you Strength for Today by Dr. D. James Kennedy and Dr. Jerry Newcomb as our thanks. Simply write to us at D. James Kennedy Ministries, Box 11154, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33339, or call toll-free 877-962-7677. Or you can go online to djkm.org. Recently, astronaut Mark Kelly, the husband of former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, sent out a tweet criticizing the supporters of Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. He wrote, quote, "One of the greatest leaders of modern times, Sir Winston Churchill, said, In victory, magnanimity. I guess those days are over. Kelly was immediately attacked, but not by conservatives. He was attacked by the left, the very people he intended to please with his tweet. He was duly informed that Churchill, who was the bulwark against Hitler in Europe, was actually nothing more than a racist and a mass murderer in their telling of it. Kelly then duly prostrated himself before the mob in apology. He wrote, "Did not mean to offend by quoting Churchill. My apologies. I will go and educate myself further on his atrocities and racist views which I do not support." This is amazing. Kelly's abject apology sounds like something out of Orwell's 1984, where history is rewritten on a daily basis to suit the needs of the party, and forced re-education is the order of the day. Of course, the proper response to such propagandistic revisionism would be scorn and derision. Churchill helped save the world from Nazism. But here's the larger point. We must recognize that this is not an isolated incident. The left is in the midst of a long project of revising history to recast as dark and evil all of the elements that made Western civilization the greatest in the history of the world. When Israel took possession of the Promised Land, Joshua instructed them to take stones from the Jordan River and place them as a reminder of what God had done. Friends, history matters, and remembering it accurately is a biblical imperative. The attempts to revise our history in service of modern, politically correct ideology is not of God. And as Christians, we should stand resolutely against it. D. James Kennedy Ministries is standing for truth and defending your freedom. I'm Frank Wright. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Truths That Transform. We'll see you next time.
Next week on Truths That Transform.
In the name of God begins our search this day for the meaning of this monument, more importantly, for the meaning of the Pilgrims.
By their own voices and by their own individual initiation. And so that practice they carried over to the civil realm. And they drew up the Mayflower Compact on board the ship off of Provincetown Harbor in Plymouth.
That's next week. Today's program is available on DVD for your gift to this ministry of any amount. Please call, write, or log on to our website today. This has been a production of D. James Kennedy Ministries.